A fine rain hammered against the cobblestones, forming small puddles that shimmered under the light of rusty street lamps. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and damp wood. Matteo, the historian, walked through the silent streets, his hands tucked into the pockets of his dark overcoat, shielding himself from the damp chill. The sound of a tram echoed between the stone buildings, its silhouette disappearing into the thick morning mist. He stopped before an ancient archway, where worn runes seemed to gleam under the weak light. Something about the pattern of these markings unsettled him, as if they told a story he should already know. The solar eclipse that morning had left the residents uneasy. Even the skeptics admitted to feeling something strange in the air. Matteo felt the same. Ever since the phenomenon had blocked the sun for 7 minutes, forgotten objects in museums had begun to crack and glow, while whispers of dead languages echoed through the city's cafes. He followed the path to the Acropolis, where a team of scientists examined the Parthenon. Dr. Sarah looked up from a portable spectrometer as he approached. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses and explained that the light during the eclipse contained frequencies never recorded before, something that defied the known laws of physics. Matteo noticed that she avoided mentioning the cracked artifacts, as if she feared their significance. Later, in a tavern, he met Katerina, a woman who claimed to have seen shadows moving against the wind during the eclipse. She spoke in short sentences, as if each word required great effort, and handed him a fragment of pottery with a symbol identical to the runes on the archway. Matteo kept it in his pocket, feeling its weight increase with each step. High atop a cliff, an ancient tower was visible in the distance. The wind whistled through the crevices of the rocks, but there was a sense that something mysterious was hidden there, something long forgotten by those who lived nearby. Despite the warnings from the locals about the danger, Matteo decided to go there the next morning. During the climb, he noticed that the vegetation formed circular patterns on the ground, as if something had been dragged down the mountain. Inside the tower, he found walls covered in inscriptions similar to the city's runes. In the center, there was a stone altar with a depression shaped like a crescent moon. He placed the pottery there. An array of light filtering through a crack in the ceiling illuminated the object. Symbols projected onto the floor and began to move, forming a map that pointed towards the Aegean Sea. At that moment, a thunderous roar echoed, though the sky was clear. Matteo ran out, but upon returning to the city, he learned that the same sound had been heard in all directions. The artifacts had stopped glowing, and the whispers had ceased, for now. News of the map in the tower spread quickly among scholars, but Matteo kept the details secret. He spent days poring over ancient records in the Athenian library, where he discovered references to a group called the Watchers of Alma, who believed that deep eclipses were portals to ancient knowledge. A note in a 17th-century manuscript mentioned an island in the Aegean Sea, Thalassa, supposedly submerged after a catastrophe. The map from the tower matched the description of the island. Meanwhile, Katerina had disappeared, leaving behind a coded message about waves that do not wet. Dr. Sarah began receiving anonymous threats to abandon her research. One night, a man in a gray overcoat approached him, claiming to work for an international foundation. He offered resources for an expedition to Thalassa, but demanded absolute secrecy. Matteo refused, suspicious, but realized that others were already in motion. The next morning, a fisherman reported seeing strange lights on the horizon, towards the sea. Matteo decided to go alone, renting a small boat. During the journey, the compass spun aimlessly, and the radio emitted static interspersed with ancient Greek voices. When he reached the coordinates on the map, the sea was calm, but the water began to darken, forming a perfect circle. Suddenly, a metallic structure emerged from beneath the waves, covered in incrustations resembling runes. Diving down, Matteo found a chamber with walls made of a material similar to obsidian and a luminous sphere floating on a pedestal. As he touched it, fragmented visions struck him: submerged cities, equations in unknown languages, and a man with silver eyes repeating, "The cycle cannot be broken." Returning to the surface, he saw 3 boats approaching, including the one belonging to the man in the gray overcoat. He hid the sphere and swam to a nearby cave, where he found Katerina, who admitted to having been hired to monitor him. She revealed that the Foundation sought to control the power of the eclipse to alter reality. Together, they decided to take the sphere back to the tower, but a sudden storm damaged the boat. Matteo lost consciousness and awoke on an unknown beach, with the sphere intact beside him. Katerina had vanished, leaving only a piece of her dress caught on a coral. Back in the tower, Matteo placed the sphere on the altar, which began to emit a low hum. The walls began to vibrate, and symbols projected into the air, forming a constellation that corresponded to the date of the next solar eclipse. Dr. Sarah appeared suddenly, wounded in the arm, and recounted that men from the Foundation had raided her laboratory. She brought a 19th-century journal detailing a ritual to seal the portal. As they deciphered the instructions, the ground trembled, and the sphere split into 12 fragments, each floating toward specific parts of the city. Matteo, Sarah, and a group of volunteers followed the fragments, which led them to places like the Temple of Zeus and the Library of Hadrian. In each location, they found buried artifacts that, when assembled, formed a mosaic with the symbol of the Ouroboros. Meanwhile, the man in the gray overcoat reappeared at the Parthenon, leading a team trying to collect the fragments. Matteo confronted him, and during the struggle, one of the fragments fell to the ground, creating a fissure that sucked everything around it. Sarah recited part of the ritual from the journal, closing the fissure. But the man escaped with 3 fragments. The next morning, another solar eclipse occurred, this time lasting only a few seconds. The remaining fragments merged into a single light that pointed towards the tower. There, Matteo discovered that the structure was actually an ancient observatory designed to calculate eclipse cycles with millennial precision. In a secret chamber, they found a mechanism similar to that of Antikythera, but with gears that rotated in harmony with the recovered sphere. Activating it, a projection of the solar system emerged, showing an unknown planet aligning with Earth. The man in the gray overcoat reappeared once more, revealing himself to be a descendant of the Watchers of Alma. He explained that the solar eclipse was a sign that the hidden planet was approaching, bringing with it an entity capable of granting infinite knowledge or destroying reality. Matteo, Sarah, and Katerina, who mysteriously reappeared, had to decide whether to use the mechanism to accelerate or prevent the alignment. Each choice held unpredictable consequences, and time was running out as the light of the next eclipse began to tint the horizon. The wind swept dry leaves across the observatory floor, as Matteo adjusted the last screws of the ancient mechanism. Sarah, with her arm bandaged, translated archaic Greek words scrawled on the walls, her voice trembling through the silence. Katerina, now wearing a faded tunic she found in the tower, watched the sky with a makeshift telescope, her movements quick and nervous. The man in the gray overcoat, whose real name they discovered was Leon, remained at a distance, his eyes fixed on the projection of the solar system. "The hidden planet is not a threat," he repeated, "but a key." His arguments were precise, almost convincing, but Matteo remembered the fissures that had nearly destroyed them. The mechanism began to spin faster, its gears grinding in sync with the approaching eclipse. The fragments of the sphere, now scattered throughout the city, emitted pulses of light that attracted curious residents. Among them was a child who disappeared after touching one of the fragments, leaving only a drawing of 3 intertwined moons. Tension escalated when a group of students, influenced by Katerina's stories, tried to steal a fragment to protect Athens. The confusion lasted minutes, but the damage was done. The mechanism jammed, and the projection of the unknown planet began to flicker, as if something struggled to break free. That night, while preparing a new attempt to activate the device, an earthquake shook the tower. Walls cracked, revealing underground chambers with inscriptions identical to those on the mechanism. In one of them, they found an obsidian sarcophagus containing a skeleton dressed in a tunic covered in constellations. Underneath the clothing, there was a diary written in a language that Sarah identified as a variation of Etruscan. The pages described a pact between humans and those who dwell in the shadows of the eclipse, sealed with sacrifices that guaranteed knowledge in exchange for silence. Matteo realized that the Ouroboros on the mosaic did not symbolize a natural cycle, but a prison. Matteo, with heavy breathing and eyes fixed on the sarcophagus, felt the weight of an ancient truth he had never imagined. The diary mentioned that each eclipse was a moment when the barriers between worlds became thin, and that Hidden Planet was not just a distant star, but an entity that observed, waiting. The sphere he had recovered was a seal, and the fragments scattered throughout the city were pieces of the same power. "We can't simply destroy it," whispered Sarah, her voice trembling with fear and fascination. "Perhaps that's what they want, for us to become like them." Leon, despite the tension, seemed almost relieved. "Knowledge is not an enemy," he said, his tone serene contrasting with the turmoil around them. "It's just a choice. You can close the cycle or open it. But remember, what is within the eclipse cannot be forgotten. He extended his hand, as if wanting to touch the projection of the solar system, but Matteo recoiled. "You've already seen what happens when someone tries to control this," he replied, his eyes fixed on Leon's silver eyes. "We are no longer guardians. We are only witnesses." That dawn, as the sky began to darken again, Matteo decided to do the only thing that seemed right: destroy the mechanism. With the help of Sarah and Katerina, they disassembled the gears, broke the plates, and buried the fragments in the ruins of the tower. The light of the sphere vanished, and the hidden planet disappeared from the projection. When the sun returned, the city awoke in silence, as if something had been forgotten. Matteo, now without the burden of the past, walked to the ancient archway where it all began, leaving behind the story that should never have been told.